Welcome once again to Tarot Tuesday. My name is Shannon Douglas, and today we have made the loop. Last week I covered off the World card as I reached the end of the major arcana. And as I promised, I'm going to loop back, or I'm looping back to the beginning of the arcana again, because I tackled the first few combinations of cards as I started this journey in combination. So I talked about the Magician and the High Priestess, and I talked about the Empress and the Emperor, and I talked about the masculine and feminine archetypes, largely in response to some online kind of trolling and attacking that I was getting. Somebody told me that my gender was socially constructed, and I wasn't actually a dude, and so I took an archetypal view of that and put up a response, and I treated it within a context. And now I really want to get to the deeper esoteric meanings of the first 5 or 6 cards of the major arcana, so that I can present to you a complete playlist with all 22 cards with a deep reflection of the archetypes of tarot. Today, of course, is the Magician. Now, I'm starting with the number 1 card and not with the Fool, and I'm probably going to get some feedback on that. The Fool, the number 0 card, like the Joker in a deck of playing cards, is sometimes included in the deck and used as a card. Sometimes it sits outside of the deck. And for these purposes, I'm going to refer to the Fool a number of times as I carry through the Magician and the Priestess and the next couple of cards. And then I may do a separate sort of capstone piece to just the Fool card and its meaning and symbolism. But the tarot, the major arcana, is known as the Fool's journey. And so in every card that we approach, we assume that the Fool is involved. That is us. The Fool's journey is the journey of our own lives and our growth and development, and our development of wisdom and understanding. And so I won't specifically talk about the Fool card as we unpack the image and the symbolism of the Magician. Now, the first 2 cards, Magician and High Priestess, give the lay of the land when it comes to the major arcana. And what I mean by that is that they start to give us a ground or a structure of the body-mind complex, the psyche, the self, and the Magician represents, or his 4 tools are on the table: the pentacle, the sword, the cup, and the wand. And those are his magical instruments. And if we look just at those 4 symbols, we can see that what's implied in the Magician card is that just about the entirety of the deck of tarot can be looked at through the lens of the Magician, or through the tools of the Magician. We have the minor arcana, the 56 cards of the pips, they're sometimes called, 4 suits: earth, water, fire, and air, that correspond to the 4 elements on the Magician's table. So he's giving us a high-level view of what tarot is here, and the meanings of these cards, of the deck itself, and an outline of the structure of tarot. So here's the magical tools of the Fool's journey. We have the 4 elements: pentacles, cups, swords, and wands. Those are earth, water, fire, and air. There is dispute, of course, as to whether swords represent fire or air. That's a long-standing debate within tarot. I'm of the minority opinion that the swords represent fire. They represent action, change, transformation, decisions, conflict, where others perceive it as, and I don't think either are wrong. By the way, I'm not trying to say my way is right, someone else is wrong. The way that you interpret and engage with tarot, if you're reflecting on tarot or if you're doing tarot readings, informs the outcome. So the language that you teach yourself and train your unconscious mind to understand and communicate with is the language that you will get. So if you train yourself or come to the conclusion and ascertainment that the element of fire is represented by the wands or the spears or the baton, they're called in Italian and French, then that is the way your intuition will interpret and unpack, and that's perfect. Okay, so further along in the Magician card, besides these four elements, we have the symbol of infinity. And the infinity symbol connects us to the totality of the deck, or the totality of the universe. And the magician, the masculine archetype, the pattern, the pater, or father, it outlines with these four elements the structure of the universe itself. In his hand, he has the wand that connects the as above and so below, and here we have this young masculine archetype that is connecting the totality of the universe, the above and the below, the four elements. I'm going to get to or share with you something called AQAL. It's spelled AQAL. It's an acronym for all quadrants, all levels. It's a term and a model that comes out of integral philosophy and integral theory, which is an attempt to map all of the different disciplines of the human psyche and the human nature and the nature of the universe. And this quadrants of the AQAL is represented in the four elements, the four tools on the table. Those four quadrants we see repeated over and over again all throughout human history and in cultures all over the world. The classical Greeks, we get into 400 BC, 300 BC, we start to get into some personality type inventory, trying to explain the different temperaments of people. We get the elements, earth, water, fire, and air emerge in classical philosophy or Hellenistic philosophy. It's further developed in the Alexandrian period, where philosophers from Greece, Athens, where for a number of years the sort of preeminent philosophers of the world gathered, moved to Alexandria after Alexander the Great built his empire, and after it collapsed, after just a very short period of time, because there were less restrictions on the pursuits of knowledge in Egypt than there were in Greece. And the four elements seem to appear there because many philosophers were asking the question, what's the nature of the universe? Now, we have these four quadrants that appear all over, and that seems to have created parallel. So the parallel structures are the medicine wheel in North American indigenous tradition. So there's the medicine wheel there, four quadrants. The four quadrants correspond to the four directions, the four seasons. There are four phases of life. There are four core totem animals that vary by nation around Turtle Island and throughout Turtle Island. We have that four quadrant model showing up in medicine wheels and earth wheels, stone circles that appear throughout Europe and the United Kingdom. The four quadrant model appears in modern personality type inventories. So Carl Jung and the Myers-Briggs. The Myers-Briggs actually is an inventory of 16 different archetypes or characters, based on four spectrums of personality. The four spectrums are introversion versus extroversion, intuitor versus sensor, thinker versus feeler, and judger versus perceiver. And if you it's going to play out those spectrums, there are 16 possible combinations of those. Later along down the line, so Carl Jung started developing that approximately 100 years ago. In 1921, he published the book Archetypes of Personality, or Personality Types, or something like this. And that was the first one. About a decade later at Harvard, we saw another four quadrant model emerge through scientific metrics and study that was done by a guy by the name of, I believe it's Henry Marsden or Marston. His work led to our modern day disc profile. The disc stands for, I want to get this right. Originally it was dominance, inducement, submission, and collaboration or something like this. Marston was, let's say, very liberal. He lived in a polyamorous relationship, and the dominant submissive still plays in certain circles of let's say, very liberal people today. But it stands for, now in the disc profile, it's driver or dominant influence, conscientiousness, or supportiveness and conscientiousness. And it really describes 4 different temperaments or personality kind of channels that people operate on predominantly. Now, we all have these 4 elements within us. The classical Greeks put forward the idea that the universe is made up of these 4 elements, and that everything we look at, we can look at a tree and say it's 4 parts earth, 1 part water, 2 parts air, and very little fire, but it's there. And they were attempting some sort of cosmology. At least that's what we learn in chemistry. But really, these 4 elements describe the nature of human temperament and how we express ourselves, and they connect to a whole bunch of things in the natural world. Now, those quadrants exist at any given level of development. And so they form a half of the framework for a model of the universe that tarot illuminates as we journey the Fools through the major arcana. The next card I'm going to talk about next week is the High Priestess card, and we can see her here. There are 2 pillars here that are related to the tradition of Hebrew mysticism known as the Kabbalah. In behind the priestess, you can see these pomegranates, and they're arranged in a pattern that's called the Kabbalah. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Kabbalah, but this parallels structures and tools like the 7 chakras from the Hindu tradition. In modern psychology, we have developmental levels. So Piaget outlined numerous different levels of development, from infancy through childhood, toddler, childhood, teenage years, the development of the psyche, the development of the mind, the development of our understanding of different relationships. So this ties into this idea of aqua, all quadrants, all lines, all levels. The levels are, if they're illustrated in the 10 Sephira, developmental levels. So we could say at level 1, or the base level, there are 4 elements there. And at level 2, the 4 elements take on different patterns. At level 3, the 4 elements take on different patterns. So the quadrants rise through. We can look at every single card in the major arcana in terms of the 4 elements. We can use those 4 elements as a map to interpret any reading or any circumstance or any person that we're dealing with. The Fool card here contains the picture of our let's say the cosmic egg, the unformed or unpatterned raw material of the individual. We can think of the Fool as an individual being born into the world. We can also think of this journey as the Fool's journey, the journey of an individual. And we're going to see at the individual level the internal transformations that we go through and external transformations that we go through. And we can look at the Fool's journey in terms of institutions, organizations, or groups. And groups have a self-identity and a perceived or persona identity, an external identity versus an internal identity. And those are the quadrants. Those are the individual internal, individual external, group internal, group external. That's another form of the cosmic wheel, the 4-element map. And we can look and we can interpret tarot through any one of those 4 lenses, or we can use combinations of them. What's the internal experience we're having as an individual? What's the external experience we're having as an individual? In early life, Piaget might describe external and internal as having a perception at a certain stage an internal perception of object permanence of an external object. What that means is a child at an early stage of life, if you are playing with a child using a ball, and then you hide the ball behind you, the object is impermanent in the infant's mind. Out of sight, out of mind, it no longer exists. And at a certain stage of development, internal cognitive development, the child recognizes, hey, that ball is still behind your back. You're not fooling me. This is the internal process or stage of development the child is moving through. But there are physiological or external things that the child is going through as well. They've developed more motor skills, ambulation, and they're bigger. They have a greater capacity to manipulate objects physically. So internal, external. That's the AQUAL map, all quadrants. Internal individual, external individual, internal group or community or society, external group, community, or society persona. Those are the filters through which those four elements can be interpreted. Now the Fool, going through the world, thinking of the Fool as an individual is unprepared and naive. And they have a companion with them, this little white dog. And this white dog is extremely important in my understanding of tarot and my understanding of my own self. And that is our intuition. And in the Fool, in the foreground, you can see this dog. The Fool's about to step off a cliff. We could look at the dog and we can think, okay, this is also a naive playmate. It does look like a puppy. But perhaps that intuitive part of ourselves is there to prevent the Fool from really getting into trouble. So acting like an intuitive guide, an impulse, we can interpret this perhaps as a spirit guide function or internal communication that we have with ourselves. So there we go. We start here, and this leads me to the High Priestess that we'll see next week. More about the levels. I'm going to get into some of the specifics of those 10 Sephira, the seven levels of development as outlined in that. I'll show some parallels, structures, talk a little bit more about developmental psychology, focusing on the deeper esoteric archetypal meanings of the major arcana of tarot. My name is Shannon Douglas. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe. If you've got some comments here, let me know. If you want to see me tackle a tarot subject from a specific angle, let me know. And I will weave it into the narrative that I put up once a week. This has been Tarot Tuesday. Shannon Douglas.